It's the Opperman Report. Join digital forensic investigator and PI Ed Opperman for an in-depth discussion of conspiracy theories, strategy of New World Order resistance, high-profile court cases in the news, and interviews with expert guests and authors on these topics and more. It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, private investigator Ed Opperman. You can find me at Opperman Investigations and Digital Forensic Consulting, either through my website, emailrevealer.com. You can just email me directly at oppermaninvestigations@gmail.com. That's if you're looking for a PI. Fascinating topic today is the DC sniper. Okay, especially now that I've been driving around DC all the time, and you see some of these locations where the shootings took place and stuff. So it's opened it up to me. I don't know if I ever told the story, so I have a little connection to the DC sniper too, because a friend of mine ran the hotel. She was at the front desk at the hotel that they were staying in. And the FBI came down there and had her run a bunch of names through the computer to find if they were staying at the hotel, if they were checked in there. And the guy who came up with the database and tracked down those names was Hank Asher. He used to run one of the database companies. He's passed away now. And we did a whole show about him with Megan Walsh, John Walsh's daughter, because Hank Asher was really good. Hank Asher, who was a coke smuggler, by the way, was really good friends with John Walsh, father of America's Most Wanted, Adam Walsh. But our guest today is doing a lot of research, a lot of new stuff that we haven't heard before. Her name is Katie Florsh. You can find her on Twitter under the name Katie at Mildred_Florsh, Florsh. And she has a lot of information about the DC sniper and their background and connections to the FBI, stuff like that. Katie Florsh, are you there?
Yeah. Hi.
Hey, how are you? Thank you so much. Thank you for coming on the show. Tell us about yourself. Who is Katie Florsh?
Yeah, thank you for having me. Big fan of the pod, so we're excited to chat today. I suppose I'll call myself an independent researcher of sorts, but this was really my interest in the DC snipers was born just out of general curiosity. I was moving away from Washington, D.C., and wanted to just kind of close out my time there with a little bit of reading about DC snipers, because I knew nothing about it, and just kind of fell down the rabbit hole here. But just kind of do this on the side as a passion project. So really enjoy it, and find a lot of interesting information.
Where did you live in DC?
I was in northwest DC, kind of near the zoo.
Okay, and my daughter's near that zoo now. Yeah, she's right, but a little further south, close to the park, Rock Creek Park. Yeah, I forget the street though. I just spent a whole week there moving her into her first apartment down there. With her boyfriend, actually. And we had to rent a moving van. I was driving all those narrow streets with a moving van.
Oh, yeah.
Put 300 miles on the moving van. Okay. And also, too, the directions over there are, useless, right? Because, it doesn't even understand MapQuest or GPS because the streets are just laid out so strangely.
Yeah. Driving is enough to ruin a trip, honestly. But, I really love the area. At night, if you're quiet, you could hear the lions, which felt like Jumanji. But yeah, I really liked it there.
Yeah, that would be very cool. Whenever my daughter goes shopping, she goes right past that zoo. Okay, so let's see. DC sniper. What for the audience? A lot of people are young and they're not familiar with the whole story. What year was the DC sniper? Do we know?
So the first shooting started in 2002.
Wow.
So, yep. It ran from February. Technically, the first one was in February, all the way to the end of October in 2002.
And who were those two characters? One guy was Malvo and Muhammad. Who were they?
Yep, Lee Boyd Malvo was the younger one. He was about 17, 18 when all of this started. And the other one is John Allen Muhammad, which initially his name was John Allen Williams, but changed his name just prior to the shootings.
Yeah, it's interesting. When they were searching for the name in the computer, they were it was Muhammad, John Allen, Allen, John, Muhammad. Like they were switching it around, all different combinations when they were searching for him there. It's really interesting, too. The woman who was doing that, it turned out, we found out later on, that her and her sister had brutally tortured this little boy, this little 4-year-old boy. It was her sister's, her nephew. And force feeding him peppers and stuff like that. It was just this horrific story that made the headlines down there.
My God!
Yeah, we had no idea. We thought she was like a normal person. I had no idea. And what a small world that she would be the one that the sniper would be staying there at their hotel. Just so bizarre. Now, what was how did these two hook up together, Malvo and Muhammad?
Yeah. So actually, initially, Malvo sort of wandered into a cafe where he saw Muhammad playing with his son, who was doing a flight simulator on a computer. And he noticed that the son was hungry. Muhammad ran across the street, I believe, to get a cinnamon roll, brought it back to him, and was just really kind to his son. And at the time, Malvo's dad had kind of ran out on them. He had a horrible, horrible childhood and sort of was missing that fatherhood figure. So that was his initial sighting, but the official meeting was later on. His mom, Lee's mom, was trying to get to the United States. She didn't have papers, and Muhammad's sort of gig was putting together false documents. So she actually went to him, and then they sort of serendipitously linked back up.
Okay, that's fascinating. I didn't know that. Now, what country was Malvo from?
Malvo was Jamaica. He was born in Kingston.
And you're telling me that John Allen Muhammad was in the business of producing false identifications?
Yes, yeah. Big time, if you will.
Really? I wasn't familiar with that portion either. That's very interesting. And maybe that's why they were searching for the IDs in different combinations. Now, and what was his background? I know this is the focus of your work, that his background, you suspect he was some type of FBI agent or informant, right?
Yeah. So John Allen, like I said, Williams initially, but then Muhammad was he was born in Baton Rouge in 1960 and had a pretty rough upbringing. His mom dies when he's 3 from breast cancer. Dad dies when he's 10, raised by his aunt. And when he starts school, a few accounts say that he wasn't very bright. In fact, coverage is pretty brutal towards him. They call him a loser and stuff like that. But he struggled in school. And immediately after graduating high school, so this is in 1978, he joins the Louisiana National Guard and is there for 4 years before he's court-martialed for disobeying direct orders and actually punching an officer in the face. So after the National Guard, his military activity becomes pretty difficult to pin down. Military officials and the Pentagon changed their stories quite a few times about where Muhammad was stationed, for how long, and actually whether or not he received sniper training at all while he was in the service. So initially the Army said that Muhammad did have sniper training, but very soon after they walked that back and denied it. But Muhammad himself told government officials, actually in Antigua while he was trying to obtain citizenship, that he attended, quote, Special Forces Sniper School in the U.S. military, and said that it was there that he was taught, quote, urban warfare.
What about overseas combat?
Yep. So basically the general consensus is that he enlisted in the Army in 1985, actually as a mechanic, truck driver, metal worker. And in 91, he goes to Germany just before the Persian Gulf War. And while he was there, his troop was kind of rife with racial tension. He was known to carry around the autobiography of Malcolm X and often spoke to black soldiers about racial inequities, sort of instigated a lot of fights within the troop. But then, and this is I found really fascinating, after his company was deployed to Saudi Arabia, it was 1 week before the sort of on-the-ground onset of the Gulf War, Muhammad threw a thermite grenade into his fellow soldier's tent, which it burns hot, right? It starts a fire and destroys a good amount of their supplies. And basically what happened, after the fire died down, they found the clip from the grenade. And I didn't realize this, but I guess there's identification on the clip kind of linking back to who threw it. Despite that, they claimed that they weren't able to prove that it was Muhammad that threw the grenade, so they took him back to the States in handcuffs, but was never court-martialed for it, and actually doesn't even show up on his service record.
Incredible. And this stuff about the Malcolm X and the racial agitation, do you think that was legit, or do you think that was a cover?
I think at the time it was legit. I would say, if I had to speculate, it was probably the grenade incident that really put him sort of on the map, so to speak.
Gotcha. Okay. So then what happens next after he gets back? Was he still in the military, or they kicked him out?
It's unbelievable. The Pentagon later states that he serves for 3 more years after that. He was actually promoted to the rank of sergeant, and then he was honorably discharged.
Wow.
Yeah. And one thing that is significant is after he gets back to the States, there is sort of disagreement about where he was. So some people say he was in Fort Worth, some people say he wasn't, but sort of this like locational it's difficult to pin down where exactly he was, which I think is relevant when we're thinking about potential training or the lead up to some of these crimes. But after that, Muhammad's license number is actually in the FBI database 8 more times.
Okay.
For a variety of crimes. And we chatted about this briefly earlier, but one of which was human trafficking in Florida, where he was not held at all, got off scot-free. And yeah, I mean, I think that that's a pretty significant piece of evidence that, I believe that he was protected by the government at that point.
And now this human trafficking, this was just like immigration trafficking, or were these people being put into slave trade or sex trade or anything like that? Slave labor?
I wasn't able to find any, firsthand accounts of whether it was any kind of sex trade or anything like that. I think it was just human trafficking, but there was a lot of gun smuggling, so I wouldn't be surprised if that was tied in as well.
Now, his ex-wife would know where he was those periods of time, wouldn't she? And she would have a motive to talk about it. She was a target.
Yes. That's a really interesting point. I think there's 2 main theories for why these killings happened, one of which is this sort of race war, or like getting back at people who had wronged Muhammad, but the other one was to collect his children from his ex-wife Una, who was hiding in Maryland with their kids. Basically, he had lost custody, and she was terrified at the time, so she sort of kept her mouth shut. But before all of these crimes, Una was repeatedly reporting Mohammed to the police. She brought him to court over a variety of crimes. He was physically and mentally abusive. At one point, she was actually hospitalized because she was so worried about the fate of her children while he had kidnapped them and brought them to Antigua. So I think she was pretty vocal, but it just didn't really go anywhere. Yeah.
What was her employment?
So she worked in like hospital administration at one point, but when she fled to the DMV area, she actually, her job was at the Department of Justice under John Ashcroft, despite having no previous qualifications for the position.
And when you say DMV, that's Delaware, Maryland, Virginia, for people that aren't up there. Yeah, DMV is a common DC expression.
Yeah.
And now she worked for John Ashcroft, you said?
Uh-huh.
Doing what? Doing what? Doing what?
I don't know. It's very difficult to find. All I know is, it was DOJ, during the Bush administration. And beyond that, unable to find any details.
Now, one of the other shooting victims was also FBI. What do we know about him? Any connection between him and this crew?
Yes. So one of the shooting victims was Linda Franklin. So Linda Franklin was she was an FBI agent that was newly included in the hold on, let me grab my notes really quickly. She was new in the cybersecurity division. She had just started, and it's pretty interesting. So she was shot inside of a covered parking lot outside of a Home Depot. Police initially received a tip from a witness. His name was Matthew Dowdy. Matthew's tip was that the shooter was in a cream-colored van, was dark-haired, and had a mustache. So a single shooter that does not at all fit the description of Lee or Muhammad. The police did a very cursory search, found apparently nothing to back that claim up, actually accused Dowdy of lying, and brought him to court. After a court case, he was charged $1,000, and it was sort of just this huge inconvenience for trying to submit a tip, which I find pretty interesting.
Yeah, right. Why would they go to all that effort to charge this fellow here? But you see that in other cases like Columbine. We had a Columbine witness there, and the FBI coming down on her and making her try and change her story too. You know, when they don't like your story, you just change it. You know, and also too, this area, DMV, Virginia, DC, there's a lot of people up there, retired military, even from foreign countries and stuff, and intelligence people. Everyone's like, in the business, Mm-hmm. And even just driving around, you can kind of just spot them. This guy's ex-military. This guy's, driving around. There's a lot of skullduggery going on down in that area. So for that to be a second shooter, wouldn't surprise me at all. Like a white guy in on this operation. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's one thing is, they weren't just killing in the DMV. They were also killing in states down south, in areas with a lot of drive-by shootings. So, I think it would be very easy to have a drive-by shooting attributed to them that, maybe wasn't. Yeah, but I did want to say, before we move on from Linda, so Matthew Dowdy, if you fast forward a few years, he was convicted of rape and murder. The body was found behind a utility box near Dowdy's motel, and he had pretty flimsy evidence. It was some fingerprints and a shoe print. But Dowdy was going to that power box, the utility box, to smoke cigarettes at night. So he had a pretty strong alibi. In fact, he had friends that could corroborate his story. But the court repeatedly denied his request for an investigator. He appealed a few times, denied, and then ended up charged for murder and rape, which I think is interesting and worth thinking about, just in light of this, if he saw something he wasn't supposed to see, or, had information about this killing of this woman, this FBI agent, just a little bit suspicious, this second crime that they kind of brought him in for.
Yeah, that is very interesting, yeah. Now, we know he's in prison now.
I'm not sure actually about right now, but this was in, 2007.
Okay, great.
I would imagine.
Yeah, murder, yeah, should still be in 2007. Send me his name when this is over. I'll take a look at the Department of Prisons and see where we can find this guy. Very interesting. Yeah. Now, one thing also, too, that always there's a lot of questions about is the way that Muhammad obtained the Bushmaster weapon. Like some people say it was stolen, but he had a relationship with that guy he stole it from.
Yes.
What's going on there?
And that's actually that's a really is a crazy rabbit hole. Basically, he alleges that he bought it from a Tacoma, Washington-based dealer, which would check out because he was living there for a while. But the dealer was operating under the name Bullseye Shooter Supply, located very close to the Army's Fort Lewis base, which I found was actually owned by a former U.S. Army sniper instructor. So basically what happened was the Bushmaster rifle that they first were looking to connect to Muhammad was actually, they found records, it was purchased by him from a different gun dealer named Welcher's Gun Shop. So basically, the narrative that they were going for is that Muhammad sold the gun back to Welcher's, which then sold it to another customer, which would put it back at Bullseye's Shooter Supply, which is where Muhammad would have found it. But
so he bought the same gun twice, is what they're claiming.
Basically, yeah. But there was some pretty crazy numbers about how many guns that were sold from Bullseye Shooting Supply that were involved in crimes. I think it's like 52 crimes from 1997 to 2001.
Yeah, that's quite a bit. Yeah, that's quite a bit. That's quite a bit. And it's interesting, too, you talk about, they say Muhammad was a human trafficking smuggler and an arms smuggler. Why would he need to even buy a weapon from a gun dealer at all? He would have these connections in the street.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think, I'm not sure. I think that Bullseye Shooter Supply, which sounds like a Costco name, but I think that it's like it's a front. He basically sells guns that basically the government then can track and see where they go.
Gotcha.
That would be my guess. But,
and we know those kind of programs go on because of that thing in Mexico. I forgot what Fast and Furious was called. Yeah, that whole thing. So we know these kind of things happen. Mm-hmm. Now, Muhammad, again, he's living in all these different places. It costs a lot of money to move. How is he funding all this?
Yeah, so, the question of Muhammad's funding is one that comes up quite a few times. I think we know that he was doing these fabricating documents for immigrants and helping them get to the U.S. I read one account that someone came over, organized by Muhammad in the storage area of a freight ship. So it was pretty serious, some pretty sad and not great things happening. And I think in the Diaries of the DC Sniper, which is the book that Anthony Maioli wrote with Lee Boyd Malvo, so it's a first-hand account. Lee says that a lot of the money comes from gun smuggling, but there's a couple of people that were with Muhammad in Washington when he was at this homeless shelter actually noticed that he would flash wads of money. He was taking trips, ski trips. He got multiple calls from travel agents, was going to Denver and Salt Lake City, and offering to buy, women drinks or coffee. And there's a lot of speculation about how on earth he was able to keep up this life, along with child support. I mean, he was paying $900 a month for child support.
Yeah, and D.C. is not cheap either, motels and hotels in D.C. are not cheap.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, what was the relationship between Malvo and Muhammad? Was there a sexual relationship between the two?
So in recent interviews, Malvo has stated that there was a sexual relationship between them, but that only just came up recently. Before that, it was never detailed, and some of the people that they stayed with never reported it. So, I'm not sure. I don't know how much we can really take Malvo's account, as truth, but I do know that it was a very intense training program that Muhammad had Lee on. So he would wake them up, they would go running. He wasn't allowed to eat more than, first it was 2 meals a day, and then he got him down to 1 meal a day. They would go lift weights, and then they would spend 5-6 hours a day on the weekends at the gun range.
Wow.
Yep. So, and the other thing that is really strange that Lee mentions in this Diary of the DC Sniper, which I found really helpful, he says that that Muhammad was giving him 36 vitamin supplements in the morning and 36 in the evening.
Yeah, now that wouldn't be cheap either. Yeah, you know what I mean?
Hey, that's true.
Yeah, that's another expense. And fascinating, he's got this money, but he's staying at a homeless shelter. Any other suspicious things going on at that homeless shelter? Other people, operatives there?
Yep, yeah. A lot of comments about the relationship between Lee and Muhammad, just kind of Lee not speaking, Muhammad kind of doing all of the talking for him. But he was actually, so the owner of the shelter is called Lighthouse Mission. The owner of it, this man, Reverend Archer, actually called the FBI and reported Muhammad for suspected terrorist activity. So this is in 2001. Basically, he just felt like all of the flights that Muhammad was taking, but also because Muhammad was talking about anti-American remarks to the residents at the mission, and Reverend Archer was convinced that he was a terrorist. But the FBI report never amounted to anything. It went ignored, and that's a first-hand account from Reverend Archer's quoted in a few local papers. confirming that.
That's interesting. Now, what about on Wikipedia? It says something about the motive was to extort money from the government and kidnap kids and have a training base.
Yeah.
What is that?
Yeah, so I guess the idea was there's three phases. So phase one was what we saw, which was driving around and sort of getting retribution by killing multiple people a day and sort of inciting terror. Phase two was going to be finding a cop. They were going to kill the cop pretty brutally. And then at the funeral for the cop, they were going to come in with a bomb and bomb the funeral, just as like a next level, showing that they were really serious about what they were doing. And the hope was that they were going to get a lot of money from the government. Mohammed was asking for $10 million. They were going to use that money, go to Canada, and bring a bunch of kids with them and train the kids in the same way that Lee was trained, and then basically start like an army sort of New World Order type situation where, per some of the Nation of Islam teachings, the black race would finally have, according to Muhammad, like the justice that he felt was needed. So yeah, that was their sort of long-term plan.
That's interesting. Now you just refreshed my memory. Wasn't there a larger connection with the Louis Farrakhan Nation of Islam and these two than that has been reported?
Yes. Well, I mean, so Muhammad was a very, very devout member of Nation of Islam. He changed his name because of it. He did security for them in '95 at a bunch of events. So that tie between him and Nation of Islam is very tight. When he was with Lee and initially kind of, I don't want to use the term brainwashing him, maybe conditioning him is more appropriate, he would have Lee read certain speeches from Nation of Islam into a tape recorder, and then he would make Lee sit and listen to the recording over and over and over again every single night.
That's very interesting because Farrakhan he gets into a lot of stuff, man, like a lot of numerology, a lot of triggering words and hypnotism and stuff like that too, in his speech patterns. This guy definitely knows what he's doing. He trained somewhere. Now, what was I going to say? Right. Now, toward the end, right before they were caught, there was all kind of weird stuff going on where he left a tarot card there at one of the shootings, and he was trying to communicate with the cops behind the scenes, but that somehow got out in the press. What's going on there?
Yeah, I gotta say the tarot card thing.
Yeah.
It doesn't. I don't know personally. I don't feel like it checks out with their sort of MO. They were very practical. Muhammad was very academic, systematic. Tarot cards, to me at least, sort of seem kind of woo-woo for his typical activity. But they were leaving tarot cards and writing I am God or call me God, just as kind of like their, like a calling card, claiming responsibility for the killings. The notes are really interesting. So there's one, there's a killing that happened in Montgomery. So there's a tip that there was a killing in Montgomery that needed to be investigated, and it actually happened 2 months prior. So the Charles Moose, who was the lead on the case, he's a police chief lead on the DC sniper case. Interestingly, I mean, Montgomery is in Maryland, Montgomery County, but his first instinct was to go to Montgomery, Alabama. And his claim was that a priest got a phone call that said, you need to go to Alabama and not Maryland, which the priest spoke up about and said, that's not true, never happened. So then, this is where the note comes in. So Charles Moose then says, actually, I got the story wrong. It was actually a note. And it was a note that had a list of phone numbers and a dates and times for when those phone numbers were called. And we followed those phone numbers to find out that it was in Alabama and not Maryland. However, when that note was released to the public, all of the dates and all of the times were redacted.
Go ahead.
Oh, no, I just to say that, a lot of the notes, I think, don't quite line up with the actual facts of the case, or they're just really unusual, just don't make a lot of sense, or, there's just also a detail that really isn't talked about when people typically talk about DC snipers.
What's that? Oh, the note.
Oh, the notes, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, what about, I want to ask you, don't let me forget, I want to ask you if they had any friends that they socialized with. But before that, I want to, what was this whole story when the police started communicating with them in code?
Oh, yeah. So I guess there was a note so Charles Moose, again, says that they got a note that they needed to show. This was the whole narrative that they were pushing, that apparently Muhammad felt like the police weren't taking him seriously. So the note said, I need to know that you're serious about this before I can stop shooting people. And for some reason, the code that they asked him, that was asked to say in the letter, was somehow proof that the police were taking it seriously. They were concerned, and they just wanted, I think the idea was that the shooters wanted some notoriety. I think there were some moments in Lee Boyd Malvo's interviews where he says, I kind of thought we were going to be like on the fame level of a Dahmer, that there would be TV shows and there would be books, and to a certain extent, I think that was part of it. But yeah, it's really still not clear what exactly that meant, why they asked him to say it. Some people,
you believe
some
that?
people go on a limb and say it's an MK Ultra trigger.
Right? Yeah. Well, there's a lot of brainwash. There's all kind of brainwashing, all skullduggery. The nation. This is all out there. I wouldn't put it too past some kind of brainwashing or mind control.
Facts, maybe I can't quite say it, but if you're asking sort of my more creative brain, I would say definitely.
Now, what about Malvo claims? We heard the tape on my show that Malvo claims there were 30 more murders. Do you think he's saying that now just because he wants to be known as Jeffrey Dahmer and more publicity, more fans?
Yeah, it might be. It might be. I also think it kind of harkens back to what we were talking about previously with the drive-by shootings and how easy it would be to claim them.
Yeah.
Who knows? Maybe some of those shootings were done by government officials, or they were strategic shootings, and they just need to offload on somebody, maybe. Or it could be that he genuinely did shoot more people, and maybe these victims were kind of cherry-picked to form a narrative that works. I wouldn't doubt. Muhammad wanted to kill, 6 people per day was his goal. I mean, it was prolific, I guess, for lack of a better word. But, I guess I wouldn't be surprised. I think there are a lot of shootings that were not addressed, maybe, that could be attributed.
Yeah, we did a show about the murder of Mary Pinchot Meyer, who was JFK's mistress in D.C., in one of the D.C. parks. And they pinned that murder on some guy who just got out of jail for a drunk tank. And she had a diary and stuff like that, and Cord Meyer was involved and all kind of,
They're like the worst hangover ever.
But there was they were up to their neck in spooks in this whole situation here, and they pin it on some drunk that just gets out of the drunk tank.
Yeah.
Now, what about did they have friends that they socialized with? Any kind of normal behavior?
Not really. They stayed with a buddy of an old military buddy of Muhammad. His name is Robert Holmes. And Holmes is featured in, there's a Vice documentary, I Sniper, which I think leaves a lot out, but it still is, helpful to watch. But Holmes is interviewed, and he says that he just kind of let Muhammad and Malvo in to give them a place to stay, but also, they're friends, and he enjoyed their company. But that's pretty much all I could find in terms of friends. I know that when Muhammad kind of showed up in Baton Rouge to stay with some cousins, they were all kind of thinking, why are you here? I don't think he was really on good terms with anyone, but it's interesting. His ex-Army buddy, this Robert Holmes, it was only after that FBI employee, Linda Franklin, was killed, where Robert Holmes thought, okay, I know for sure that this is Muhammad that's doing this. And that's when as soon as Linda Franklin was killed, that's when he called in the tip to the FBI.
And then why did he say that?
There's no elaboration on his part.
But just suddenly, because it's an FBI agent, and it has to be Muhammad?
Yeah. I mean, that's how I see it. That's the only discerning factor between her and any of the other victims. And it's not like it was any kind of special shooting. It was the same thing. Right. They just allegedly drove right by,
Yeah, I remember at the time they didn't make a big deal that these people were working for the FBI. It was at the time of the shootings. It wasn't some months later. Now,
there's actually there's another guy who owned Peter LaRufa, who owned a Italian restaurant, which on the surface seems like a totally normal guy. But you take a look at his LinkedIn, and he's a ex-Pentagon contractor. He
was supplying meatball subs to the military.
Yeah.
Hey, little Parmesan. Okay, Luis.
That's awesome.
I know. Okay, now you describe these two guys. They're at the range 5 hours at a time. They're lifting weights all day long. They're taking 30 pills in the morning, 30 at night. They're doing all this stuff, right? Push-ups. But we're to believe that they got caught with their pants down. They're sleeping in their getaway car, with the rifle in the getaway car, and they're sleeping at a rest stop. And the cops just knock on the door, hey, and they just give themselves up. Is that the story?
Yeah, it's strange. I mean, I personally don't buy it. Apparently it was a trucker that was at a truck stop and saw the car and called in the tip. But again, this Charles Moose kind of comes back up. There was some leaked documents. Basically, Charles was doing some union busting for the police and really pissed some people off, and they leaked a bunch of classified documents that showed that that Moose knew that he knew the descriptions of the snipers well before he released the descriptions of the snipers. There's some speculation that he was sort of a puppeteer that wanted to manipulate this case to make himself look really good. I don't know if that might have been a factor. I wouldn't be surprised if it was.
Well, we know also, too, we know for a fact they had the names because Hank Asher wrote about it. Oh, am I working at DC Sniper? I found you. I knew the names. He said they knew the names. Now, it's... Yeah. And I've been at every one of those rest stops, okay, around. Okay, every time I go to DC, I drive up there. So it's not a big surveillance to check these rest stops every half hour. Yeah. That wouldn't be a big deal whatsoever.
No, and in fact, they passed through traffic stops. I think it was something like 10 times.
Really?
Yeah, they went right through, and apparently there's video footage. I haven't found it. It's news coverage of one of the shootings, and you can see them sitting in the background in their car.
Wow.
Yeah.
Can you see them cleaning their weapons?
Yeah, taking all their vitamins.
Yeah, right. That's right. Oh my God! Yeah, so, what is your conclusion to all this? What is your? It stinks to high heaven, okay? But what is your conclusion of Katie Florsh?
Yeah. Well, so I guess like maybe a good place to go is just there's some like for my theories. I think there's some weirdness. The political climate obviously is a big one. So. They were finally arrested on October 24th. So just to recap the week going up to October 24th, just like give an idea of what we were dealing with, post 9/11. It was on the 16th, October 16th, that Bush got authorization for military force against Iraq. Mm. And then 2 days later, bin Laden releases a video congratulating his followers on their efforts at jihad. And then on the 23rd, it's the day before they're arrested, the defense appropriations bills were signed by Bush. It was $355 billion. My thought is, the government really needed patriotism. They needed to instill a sense of fear in people so that they felt like they were enthusiastic about putting more money into the war, paying more taxes. And I think this was a really good way to drive that for two reasons. One is, Muhammad changed his name like a week before the shooting started.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was very convenient. And then Lee was an illegal alien. He was an immigrant terrorist coming onto our soil,
right,
and killing people. In fact, Lee was detained. Immigration forces caught him and was detained and then let go in the U.S. Without proper citizenship. I think that it was really helpful to have someone who is Nation of Islam, a person of color, and then an illegal immigrant.
Yeah, Muhammad.
Yeah, Muhammad. You can't.
Really quick question, because we only got about a minute left. Do you know anything about him taking out a loan or any kind of applying for an apartment or something between the time he changed his name to the time that the end when they caught him?
I'm not familiar with that, no.
Okay, because I can't understand how Hank Asher could have, if he just changed that name, because I know where he gets his databases from. It's all credit header stuff. How could he, you know what I mean? Unless you're applying for credit, I can't see, but maybe they did, who knows? But even then, that would be pretty quick for it to be updated, back in those days especially.
Yeah, I think if you have the support of the FBI things go pretty quickly.
Well, it would. I guess maybe. I don't know, man. Maybe checking into motels is the only thing I could think of.
True.
I can't think of a. We're out of time anyway. Okay, we're not going to solve this case today. We're going to let Katie Florsh back on the case here, and she's going to get back to us as soon as this is solved. Okay, you can find her, Katie, at Mildred_Florish on Twitter and follow her work. Now, Katie, when does your podcast start? Next week?
I do not have one, but I'm going to continue posting stuff for now on Twitter, so you can find my stuff there for now.
Okay, great. Because usually, I have a guest on the next week they start a podcast, but okay, we'll keep an eye out for your podcast. Katie, thank you so much. Okay, it was a lot of fun.
Thanks so much.
No, this was great. Thank you. Good night.